When Sloan won $20 million, she laughed while filing for divorce. Sure, her blue-collar husband wouldn't get a dime. What she didn't know was that the prenup her own father forced him to sign would become the very thing that took her down. This is the story of how a humble construction worker outplayed New York high society and walked away with everything that truly mattered. The alarm rang at 5:30 a.m., slicing through the quiet of a small Brooklyn apartment. Alden Brooks was already halfway out of bed before the second beep. After years in construction, early mornings were routine, brutal but familiar. He didn't complain, he never had. That morning was like any other. Quick shower, black coffee from a chipped thermos, boots laced tight, hard hat under arm. Before stepping out, he paused for two things that never changed. First, he kissed his wife, Sloan, on the forehead. Then he peeked into 6-year-old Tessie's room. She was curled up under her blanket, hugging the same worn rabbit she'd had since infancy. That moment, every morning, reminded him why he pushed himself so hard. By 7 a.m., Alden was already waist-deep in concrete and rebar at a high-rise site in Midtown. The foreman trusted him with more than most: plans, crew leadership, even the occasional design question. Alden wasn't just another worker. He knew buildings from the foundation up, and more importantly, he knew how to show up. Rain, heat, holidays. It didn't matter. He worked. Everyone on the crew knew about Sloan. She came from money, not billionaire yacht club money, but the kind that played tennis at private courts and had friends who used summer as a verb. When Alden met her, she was different, or so he thought. She said she loved that he was grounded, that he could fix things, that he didn't come from her world. Maybe back then it was true. Sloan hadn't worked since Tessie was born. She said raising a child was work, and Alden respected that. But over time, she stopped pretending to be part of their struggle. While he pulled 10-hour shifts, she shopped, scrolled, and lunched. He'd come home exhausted and covered in dust, and she'd greet him with news from her Pilates class or her new favorite wine. Still, Alden kept the peace. Dinner at the table, story time with Tessie. Bills paid, barely. Their apartment wasn't much, but it was warm, honest, and despite everything, he still believed in their family. He still believed in Sloan. That belief began to crack the day she bought the lottery ticket. It was a Thursday morning. Alden had already left for the site. Sloan had the whole day mapped out: yoga at 10, lunch at noon, errands in the afternoon. On a whim, she stopped at the corner deli and picked up a lottery ticket. 5 numbers, quick pick, nothing serious, except it was. By 9 a.m., she was screaming in the kitchen. Every number matched, $20 million. In a single moment, everything changed. By 10 o'clock, she'd called her mother, her friends, and practically the entire building. The news spread like wildfire. Alden got the call while balancing on scaffolding 6 stories up. She was crying, laughing, gasping. He couldn't even make out the words. All he heard was, "Come home, now." When he walked in the door 2 hours later, the apartment was packed. Neighbors clapped him on the back. Old Mrs. Chen from 2A brought cookies. Someone popped champagne. And in the middle of it all was Sloan, radiant with joy, arms stretched wide like royalty. Their eyes met across the room. He saw their entire future in that moment, paying off debts, saving for Tessie's college, maybe even starting a business. They hugged, laughed, cried. That night, Tessie whispered, "We're rich, Daddy. Mommy said we can get a castle." And for one night, it felt like everything might finally go right. But by the next morning, something had shifted. Sloan was quieter, more distant. She started locking her phone. She smiled less. She avoided conversations about finances, shrugging them off with, "I'll deal with it later." She began disappearing for hours at a time. Alden chalked it up to shock. Who wouldn't be overwhelmed by that kind of money? But a week later, luxury shopping bags started piling up. He tried to talk to her. "Shouldn't we figure out a plan?" he asked. "It's my money, Alden," she said without blinking. "I scratched the ticket. I won it. You think you're entitled to half just because you happen to be married to me?" That was the first real crack, but it wouldn't be the last. By the end of week 2, Sloan was hardly coming home. When she did, she was on her phone or whispering in the bedroom. Tessie asked where Mommy was more and more. Alden didn't have answers. Then 3 weeks to the day after the win, Sloane sat waiting in the living room. She handed him a manila envelope. "It's over," she said coldly. "You were a phase, a lesson. I want a divorce." She smiled as he opened the papers. It wasn't just confidence. It was cruelty. "You'll get nothing," she said, standing up, "just like when you came into this marriage." What she didn't know was that Alden remembered something she had long forgotten. A dusty document signed 8 years earlier at a fancy dinner table in Westchester. A prenup, drafted by her own father. She thought she'd planned the perfect betrayal. But Alden was just getting started. The moment Sloane handed Alden the divorce papers, everything in him froze. Not out of fear, but disbelief. For 8 years, he'd carried the weight of their life together. Paid the bills, sacrificed sleep, missed holidays, worked weekends. And now, with a $20 million windfall, she was cutting him loose like dead weight. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. Her delivery was clinical. "You'll never see a dime," she said, her tone flat. "I've already spoken to an attorney. This won't take long." Alden didn't respond right away. He simply picked up the papers and walked into the kitchen. Not because he needed to read them, he knew what they said, but because he needed a second to breathe. The apartment, once filled with laughter and bedtime stories, now felt like a stage for a breakup she'd been rehearsing for weeks. The next morning, Alden took a sick day for the first time in years. Not because he was physically ill, but because he had work to do. The kind that didn't involve hard hats or blueprints. He called Connor Hale. They'd grown up in the same neighborhood, taken opposite paths, but never lost touch. While Alden had gone straight into construction, Connor had fought his way through law school. Alden had helped him move into his first office, even patched up the drywall. Now Alden needed more than friendship. He needed strategy. By noon, Alden was sitting across from Connor's desk, the divorce papers laid out between them. "She says I'm getting nothing," he said quietly. "She's got lawyers and money." Connor didn't blink. "Doesn't matter. New York law is clear. Anything gained during the marriage is marital property." "Even the lottery ticket?" Alden asked. "She bought it, scratched it, claimed it." Connor nodded. "She was married at the time. Unless she can prove you were legally separated or that it was a gift solely to her, it's joint." "But that's not all." He leaned back, folding his hands. "Do you remember signing a prenup?" Alden's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, at her parents' house. Her dad made me sign it. Didn't really read it, just signed." Connor leaned forward. "Find it. That document could be your lifeline." Later that night, Alden dug through his sock drawer. Behind an old cigar box was the manila folder he'd barely glanced at 8 years ago. The original prenup, still in its envelope, signed and dated. When he dropped it on Connor's desk the next morning, his friend's eyes lit up. "This changes everything," Connor said. "It says, word for word, all assets acquired during the marriage are joint property. Not yours, not hers, ours. She may think she's walking away with it all, but she's walking straight into a legal buzzsaw." Meanwhile, Sloane's behavior shifted from cold to smug. She began flaunting her new life on social media. Dinners in the city, shopping sprees. Solo time, she captioned under champagne selfies. When neighbors asked where Alden was, she just laughed. "Oh, he's busy with blueprints or whatever it is construction guys do." What she didn't know was that Alden had stopped working entirely. For 3 weeks, he quietly built his case, gathered bank records, documented changes in Sloane's behavior. Even Tessie had begun to notice. "Mommy's always gone now," she said one night, playing with her cereal. "She says we don't have to eat dinner together anymore." Alden's heart broke hearing that, but it also lit a fire. If Sloane wanted to rewrite their family's story, she'd have to face the truth in front of a judge. The hearing date was set for late November. It didn't take long for the media to catch wind of the story. A $20 million lottery win, a surprise divorce, a working-class husband versus Manhattan socialites. Reporters lined the steps outside the courthouse. News outlets requested interviews. Alden declined every one. He wasn't there to make headlines. He was there to fight for what was fair. When the day arrived, Alden walked into the courtroom wearing the same suit he'd worn to his wedding. Sloane arrived with her father, Grant Harrington, a legal team, and a designer handbag that probably cost more than Alden's monthly rent. She didn't look nervous. She looked victorious. As the room filled with spectators, Connor leaned over and whispered, "Let her talk. Don't react. Just wait for the judge to read the agreement." That advice turned out to be critical, because when Sloane took the stand, she didn't hold back. "He was never on my level," she said. "I supported him for years. This money is mine. He's trying to rob me." Connor didn't flinch. Alden kept his eyes on Tessie, sitting in the front row beside a court-appointed child advocate, swinging her legs and waving at him. He waved back. Then the judge asked about the prenup. Connor handed it over. The judge read it once, then again. Her verdict was simple. The ticket was purchased during the marriage. The winnings are joint property. Alden is entitled to 50%. Sloane's smile collapsed. She stood up, slammed her hand on the table, and snapped, "Then he can take the kid too. I'm done with both of them." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Alden didn't say a word. He simply turned and opened his arms. Tessie ran to him. She had no idea her life had just changed forever. But Alden did. He didn't win $10 million that day. He won his daughter. The gavel struck once. The room fell silent. Custody of the minor child, Tessie Brooks, is awarded to her father, Alden Brooks. Judge Collins stated firmly. The mother has voluntarily relinquished her parental claim. It was a moment no one had expected. Sloane, in a single outburst of frustration, had surrendered the only person Alden ever truly cared about more than his own future. The courtroom buzzed with shock. Her lawyers looked horrified. Even her father, Grant Harrington, seemed stunned. But Alden wasn't thinking about any of them. He was kneeling, arms open, as Tessie ran across the courtroom. Her small arms wrapped around his neck, and for the first time in weeks, Alden felt something more powerful than anger or betrayal: relief. The judge's ruling was clear. The lottery winnings would be split equally, $10 million to Sloane, $10 million to Alden. But it wasn't the money that mattered. Alden had walked into that courtroom unsure of what he'd lose. He walked out with everything that mattered intact. He didn't look back at Sloane. He didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, Alden adjusted quickly to life as a single father. The apartment stayed the same, but their world changed completely. With the settlement money, Alden paid off debts, opened a college fund for Tessie, and quietly started planning something bigger. He didn't rush into luxury. No flashy cars, no penthouse suites, just consistency. He kept Tessie in her neighborhood school. He took her to the same park on weekends, and every night he read her the same bedtime stories. Only now she slept easier, more peaceful, like the house finally had room for calm. Meanwhile, Sloane disappeared from Brooklyn entirely. Within days of the court ruling, she sold what little furniture she hadn't bought after the lottery win and moved into a downtown condo. Paparazzi caught glimpses of her in nightclubs and hotel lobbies, always with a drink in one hand and a new face on her arm. She leaned hard into the lifestyle money could buy, anything to forget the courtroom humiliation. At first, she was everywhere, featured in gossip blogs, tagged in party photos, quoted in clickbait interviews about moving on and self-love. But underneath the Instagram captions, the truth was leaking out. She had no plan, no job, no real friends, just people who wanted a taste of the money. And slowly, the $10 million began to vanish. By the second year, Alden had founded a construction company, Brooks Build Partners, starting with small residential projects and slowly expanding into commercial bids. He didn't advertise the lottery win. He didn't tell investors about the courtroom drama. He let his work speak. And it did. In year 3, his company won a city contract for affordable housing. By year 4, he had over 100 employees. The same man Sloane had once mocked for smelling like cement was now attending city planning meetings, shaking hands with mayors, and setting the direction of Brooklyn's next generation of infrastructure. Tessie thrived too. She didn't ask about her mom much. Alden never badmouthed Sloane. He didn't need to. Children notice absence louder than words. But she saw the difference. One parent who showed up every day for everything. And then one afternoon in year 5, Alden got a message that made him pause. A meeting request from Grant Harrington. He hadn't heard from Sloane's father since the divorce, but the email was clear. Harrington Holdings was in trouble. A string of bad investments, an embezzlement scandal, and a failed commercial development had left the once proud company on the edge of collapse, and they were asking Alden for help. He stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Yes, one meeting." The next week, the Harrington family walked into the Midtown office of Brooks Build Partners. The contrast was striking. Grant looked older, thinner. Margaret Harrington clutched her purse tightly, her nervous energy obvious. And then Sloan walked in. Slower than before, dressed plainly, her confidence noticeably absent. Alden waited. Sloan was the first to speak. "We need capital," she said, voice low. "If you partnered with Harrington Holdings, you could expand into Manhattan. My father has—" "I know what he has," Alden interrupted, "and what he doesn't." Grant leaned forward, hands folded. "I underestimated you. You were never just a worker. You were building something long before we noticed. And now you're the one in a position to help." Alden let that sit in the air. He thought of the dinner table at the Harrington estate 8 years ago. The look Grant gave him while sliding that prenup across the table. The way Sloan never said a word in his defense. The way they all assumed he'd never matter. He thought of Tessie, now 11, working on a science fair project at home, waiting for him. "You're asking me to clean up the mess you made," Alden said evenly. "Not just in business, but in life." Sloan's eyes dropped. "I was wrong," she said. "I know that now, but this could save everything. People's jobs, my parents' home." A long silence followed. Then Alden stood and walked to the door. He opened it slowly. "I'm building a future for my daughter," he said. "That means knowing which foundations are strong and which ones will crack under pressure." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He simply said, "Some bridges don't need rebuilding." And then he left them standing there, just like they once left him. After the meeting with the Harringtons, Alden didn't speak of it to anyone. Not his employees, not the media, not even Tessie. As far as the world was concerned, it never happened. He closed the office door behind them, and with it, he closed the last chapter of that part of his life. But the consequences of that decision spread fast. Within 6 months, Harrington Holdings filed for bankruptcy. News broke across financial networks. One of the city's oldest real estate firms had collapsed. Shareholders were furious. Creditors sued. Grant Harrington was forced to sell their Westchester estate. The family name, once stamped on downtown buildings, now appeared in court dockets and foreclosure notices. Sloan tried to pivot, first as a motivational speaker, then as a lifestyle influencer. But the timing was off, and so was the story. No one wanted to hear advice from someone who blew through $10 million and lost custody of her daughter in a courtroom meltdown. Offers dried up. The invitations stopped. The social circles that once orbited her shifted elsewhere. She found herself back in a one-bedroom rental in Queens, using off-brand makeup, applying for credit cards she'd never considered needing. Her friends were gone. Her phone was silent. The same silence Alden had once come home to after long days at the job site. Meanwhile, Alden's life became one of quiet progress. No spotlights, no press junkets, just focused growth. Brooks Build Partners expanded operations into Jersey and upstate New York. Alden hired veterans, trained young builders, and offered second chances to people with records or rough backgrounds. He remembered what it was like to be seen as disposable. He didn't forget. Tessie grew up grounded. She didn't live in luxury, but she never went without. Alden stayed involved in everything: school board meetings, weekend hikes, science fairs. He taught her how to check air pressure in tires and what compound interest meant. They had movie nights, spaghetti Wednesdays, and Sunday visits to Alden's mother. By year 7, Brooks Build was a name known across the 5 boroughs. Not for flashy marketing, but for reliability. City planners came to Alden. He turned down offers to franchise. Expansion wasn't the point. Stability was. Reputation was. One afternoon, while reviewing permits for a new school project, Alden received an unexpected letter. It was handwritten, the return address barely legible. From Sloan. He read it in his truck during lunch. No dramatic pleas, no excuses. Just an admission. She was broke. She was alone. And she wanted to see Tessie. Alden stared at the words for a long time. Part of him expected this. Another part had hoped it would never come. That evening, he sat across from Tessie at the dinner table. She was 12 now, sharp, thoughtful, more aware than most kids her age. He showed her the letter. Her first question wasn't, "What does she want?" It was, "What do you think, Dad?" Alden didn't answer right away. "I think people change," he finally said. "But it doesn't always mean we have to let them back into our lives. It depends on why they're coming back." Tessie thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "I don't need her to be my mom. You already are both parents." That conversation stayed with Alden. He didn't reply to the letter. Sloane wrote again 2 months later, then a third time, each note more humble than the last. By the fourth letter, she stopped asking to see Tessie. She just thanked Alden for not fighting her in court, for raising their daughter when she walked away, for doing what she had failed to do. That letter he kept, but he still didn't reply. Grant Harrington moved to Florida to escape the press. Margaret moved in with a sister in Connecticut. Sloane picked up work as a receptionist at a midtown firm, one of Alden's subcontractors, ironically. She kept her head down. She never used her last name publicly again. One day, Alden ran into her by accident at a hardware supply expo. She was wearing a name tag that simply said Sloane. They locked eyes briefly. Neither said a word. She gave a short nod and stepped aside, and that was it. No apology, no confrontation, just two people, passing through a moment that once could have ended everything, but no longer had power over either of them. Alden left that expo early, picked up Tessie from school. They got burgers on the way home and didn't talk about the past. There was no need. Everything that mattered was still ahead, in years past. By the time Tessie turned 16, Alden had quietly become one of the most respected names in the New York construction industry. His company had contracts with the city, public schools, hospitals. He never needed to advertise. Word of mouth did more for him than billboards ever could. He kept the same phone number, the same work ethic, and the same mindset. Build things that last. Tessie, now in high school, had grown into a thoughtful, grounded teenager. She volunteered on weekends, loved science, and planned to study architecture. When asked why, she'd shrug and say, "I grew up around buildings. I want to design what my dad builds." Every weekend, they had breakfast together. No phones, no distractions, just the two of them. Alden never remarried. He had chances, but he wasn't in a rush. He didn't need someone to complete him. His life wasn't missing anything. One morning, Tessie looked up from her plate and asked, "Do you ever regret it?" Alden didn't need clarification. "No," he said, "because every choice, even the painful ones, got me here, got us here." She nodded. That was enough. Sloane hadn't written again in years. Alden had never blocked her. But the silence this time felt different. Not like abandonment, but like acceptance. She had moved on. Quietly, finally. And so had they. One day in early spring, Alden received a letter. This time from the estate attorney of Grant Harrington. Grant had passed away. The letter was short and formal. Grant had left a small inheritance for Tessie. Nothing significant, just a symbolic gesture. A final acknowledgement of blood and family. Alden let Tessie decide what to do with it. She donated it to a nonprofit that built homes for low-income families. That weekend, she and Alden visited one of the new construction sites funded by her donation. She asked the project lead questions about zoning permits, foundation types, sustainable materials. Alden watched her, quiet pride in his eyes. She was already becoming the future he had worked for. As the sun dipped, they stood at the edge of the site. "I used to think everything was about money," Tessie said, "but it's not." Alden looked at her. "No, money's just a tool. It shows you who people really are." He didn't need to explain. She already understood. Later that year, Tessie gave a speech at her school's scholarship banquet. Alden sat in the audience, unnoticed in the back row, as his daughter stood at the podium. "I was raised by a man who worked with his hands," she said, "and when life gave him more than he ever asked for, he didn't waste it. He didn't spend it proving anything. He built a life, for us and for others. I want to do the same." The crowd clapped. Alden stayed still. The applause didn't matter. What mattered was that she meant every word. When she stepped down, she looked across the room and found him. He smiled just a little. She smiled back. That was the real legacy. Not money, not headlines, but the kind of strength that outlives bitterness. Sloane would go on to live a quiet life. No fame, no fortune, just routine. She never remarried either. And as far as anyone knew, she never contested the custody decision. Maybe she finally saw what she had walked away from. Maybe she didn't. But Alden never wished her harm. He didn't teach Tessie to hate her. He didn't rewrite history. He just moved forward, one brick, one day, one decision at a time. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full, so stable, so rooted in purpose, that nothing from your past can shake it.